Hello everyone and welcome to my oil painting class. And today we are painting Fountains Abbey again. We've got a different view from what we've done in the past. We're actually inside of the Cellarium and we're looking out towards the old courtyard and some of the guest houses. So we've got a lovely sunny day. And we are in quite a lot of darkness. Now, I've got my black and white photograph and my printer done something a little extra extraordinary, and I can see more details here, which my colored photograph didn't pick on. So I'd love to involve extra elements of perhaps the window, perhaps part of the supporting structures for the ceiling. So that makes the painting much more interesting. Otherwise, maybe that view would have been better. Okay. And because we have a lot of darks, we're painting from the inside, looking towards very bright light. We're using a dark background, so we've primed our board with acrylics, used some white, a bit of ochre, mainly violet, to get that lovely depth. So today we'll be painting slightly differently in comparison to when we work on a lighter background. Okay. Now on my palette I have some white, cadmium yellow, yellow ochre, cadmium red, deep violet, ultramarine, cerulean blue, or any cobalt blues, emerald green, viridian, phthalo green, any of those ones will be fine, and Payne's grey or any other black. I've got my black and white image just to give ourselves a quick reference for what's dark, what's light. If we were to break it down into three main tones of, I'm kind of grouping them up, 1 to 3, we've got the most light tone, okay, as just as one. 4, 5, 6 are kind of medium darknesses. There's a sub range of them, yeah, so maybe looking at that kind of 5-ish. And the last 3, we've got 7, 8, 9, all that variety. We can just have a look, summarize them, and one again here. So that's how I want us to look to begin with, to see some of the basic shapes. And this will also help us to sketch the composition. So looking at my black and white photo, what will be the darkest? Everything in front except what's behind my arch. Okay, so I'm going to keep that within that darker category. Okay, now if I were to divide everything else outside into most light and medium, I would say my sky and that front part of the ground, we've got some stone slabs, they will be into that lighter category, and everything else will be medium. Okay, so those kind of things I'd like us to find out first. So I'm going to use my synthetic round brush for sketching, bit of tips, and I'm going to use my violet. Now the violet I normally use on any other backgrounds is showing really well. This time if I were to add tiny bit of black to my violet, the more violet there than black, then we see the darkness there as well. Okay, I'm just going to check it out. Okay, we can see that one well. So first shape I'd like to find is our arch, our opening doorway, where it's going to be. I'm going to look for the doorstep, direction, approximate direction. I'm going to look for how far is my archway into my painting. So sorry, into, if I'll do it here. Okay, this is my width of my painting, so my photograph. Halfway through point is approximately somewhere here, so almost in the middle of my picture. So if that's approximately my half, my door could stop here. Okay, so this is the inside of the arch, and we can look for the width of it elsewhere. Okay, a bit more further out. So let's look for the inside of that opening. A very quick design plan. So if we need to move it about, if we need to look at its proportion, we can adjust it. My photograph from a straight vertical lines of the doorway found an extra third point perspective. Okay, I think I sat down kind of to have a bit more of a view looking towards what's at the back. So instead of having standing up, my viewpoint slightly changed. So I think the camera would have been pointing gently upwards. So that's what's happened. But it's given us an extra depth to the view. So don't be scared if you were to put those walls straight or gently lean towards each other. Not too much, but very, very gently. Okay. Both options will be fine, straight or gently leaning towards each other. And that line is going away from us as we're just standing a bit more close to one corner of the that doorway. The door would be quite grand and big, so we have the hinges on both sides. Okay, so if we can leave enough space for some of those lovely details of the hinges on one side, we've got plenty of space on the other side. Okay, and I might plan a couple of rows of different stonework, maybe something even going further up, approximately just a little bit of something. If you've done the first big shape and looks a bit too small, a little bit too big, not enough space around it, move it about. Okay, move it gently about. Careful using thick paint, especially if we're adding some black to our violet. If it's thick paint, that black will be quite hard to paint over and to deal with later on. Violet will smudge nicely with most of the colors. Black could be tricky, so make sure you do mix it with violet and you dilute it with some turbs. Okay. Right, and let's give myself an approximate height here. There's a little change of surfaces here. Okay, I'm not interested in the absolute perfection. We'll be looking for little highlights, little playful shadows. Now in black and white, if you need more details, black and white photograph might be showing more. So you see a little doorstep here, and that is that first. Oh, there's one step, there's another one here, yeah. But I'm more interested in overall shapes rather than perfection of architectural elements. Okay. Now, while we're looking at our dark shapes, can we find our window here? And again, if I were to mark the height of the picture and find it halfway through, looks like the window is just gently below that halfway through point. So that's my halfway through point, approximately somewhere a little bit lower. Okay, and again, it's a little angle only because my camera picked up that third point of perspective. So gently leaning in. If you put your walls straight here, put that window, put those vertical lines straight as well, okay? If you started leaning them a little bit, gently lean those ones as well. Okay, and there might be that lovely open arch with the whole window, and that's been cropped by those beautiful structures of the ceiling holding on to the walls, building from the walls upwards. Approximately windows height, maybe a little bit higher somewhere here. That lovely vertical starts. Again, that will be all, so that line is just gently leaning that way. That one is almost parallel, maybe tiny, another degree more, maybe another degree more, maybe another degree more, not huge amount. Okay, so that central line for these lines to come in, all of these lines to come in, maybe somewhere here. Okay, after that, from the right, everything starts leaning that way, height-wise. Normally we use third point of perspective for tall buildings or for extreme perspectives, emphasizing that height and that drama. Okay, so that's going to be somewhere here, and then any of those lovely ribs from the ceiling will come up here as well. They kind of disappear, excuse me, into the shadow. They're little minor things that we will paint them very suggestively. Right, I can decide on my window if it's need to be a little bit wider or slightly narrower, and maybe finding that tiny bit of a further into space frame. We can't quite see the light through. I think there might be another wall there, or maybe even further, like a little tunnel of a window. Okay. I don't need to line anymore. Okay, and that corner of the building, I just carried on. Oh, it's all in the shadow. If we can't see it, that's more, possibly this might be the line for the shadow rather than the actual corner. Corner of the building might be going a little more with that step direction, but it doesn't matter because it's going to all stay in a lovely dark shadow. Okay. Again, before we start looking through our doorway or gateway, okay, they might have used to bring carts into it, big barrels of wine, big carts with supplies, not just food supplies, all sorts of supplies. Okay, so I want to plan a little bit of some of these hinges and some of these dents and some of that playful shadow work on our doorway. So on the left hand side we have a narrow little stonework, a slightly wider one, and there is a shadow, and there is another one somewhere here. So I'm just dividing it in approximate spaces, and then on the bottom of those two there's a little bit of extra darkness. Can I just paint it over? I'm not going to paint all my shadows, but that might be just easier for me to paint rather than sketch a line. There's something broken, and those little hinges here. Okay, that's might be my shadow going. Maybe a bit more broken into that. So it's understanding that space, widening the shadows. Started observing things. Even if you just observe by doing those little sketches, that's all we require. If it's not quite right, if it's not quite working for you, you have plenty of time to consider it later. Okay, another possible hinge space. Okay, that's quite lovely, exciting patterns of Shadows, that's an interesting elongated triangle of darkness. Again, probably how different stone levels meet and give us different spaces. Little indents. Okay, again, I'm not going to do them all, but those are little characters, might be exciting for us. Okay, that shadow might turn into interesting shape here. Because what are we interested in? Why we're looking from the inside out? What those elements makes us fascinated by this ancient building, medieval building, shall I say? Maybe not as ancient. So I'm just using a bit of diluted paint. I'm not sure how dark it is, but it looks dark at the moment. I think it's maybe more terps than actual darkness from the paint. If I use very diluted paint, gives me enough understanding and kind of division, but it's not going to affect my future layers. The thicker we paint now, the harder it will be for us to um, put other layers over. Right, let's have a look on the right hand side of our gate. We have a lovely step which could have different worn out stone. Okay, so that straight line is changing here. Okay, I think my printer woke up. Don't know if you can hear it. Apologies if you do. Right, so I've got a bit of a step here, and another step is a bit further. You might fit it into your painting, you might not, but it's going to lead to more of a bigger shadow elsewhere. So those space is just not perfectly straight, not perfect modern steps. They've been used for a number of centuries. Okay, and then on this side, I do like this big rock stone. Okay, that one here in the little corner. That would be quite nice to use it for with some details. Okay, and also because of the gentle diagonal of the doorstep, we've got that entrance point. So that little stone becomes an entrance point we might go for before we continue following the vertical, following our arch, and then there will be a highlight on this side wall here. Okay, we will have some nice highlights, and then hopefully that will lead us via another shadow and another shadow towards the steps. The steps will be nice and dark. Sorry, I'm a bit dashing into that, but that will be our entrance. And then we're staying within that circle, within that O, within that window, a classic composition when we can work and decide where that circle might be. Now, not always it has to be looking through the window to have an O composition. It doesn't have to be perfect O either. Yes, it could be an oval, it could be central, it could be off center. It could be found through branches of trees. It could be found through groups of rocks or grasses or something else. So if you were to look out for opportunities of no composition and start spotting that, will be fantastic. Right, I'm back to the door side here. So that's will be my shadow. There'll be some hinges. Okay, somewhere there. Can work with some of those thicknesses of light and dark. Because our door is not just straight looking at us, we've got a slight change of the horizontal line. Yeah, it's leading upwards. The top of our arch, if you find those little details, how the oval of the arch is changing, they're not going to be on one line. The left one will be a little bit lower, the right one will be a little bit higher. That's kind of just a reference for it. Hinges originally might be on the parallel lines, but there might have been change of doors at different points. There might have been one part of the wall was broken, the hinge was moved, so that's not always the correct reference for us. But that little stone change, and again, we don't need all of that line, as long as it visually makes sense, not just one next to each other, not quite. Right, I think, where is it? Yeah, it's here somewhere here. And that lovely darkness. Okay, that's going to be somewhere here. You know, that little narrow triangle as well. If you lose them in your painting, there will be loads of lines going on. That will be fine as well. But they do give a lovely reference point. So if you paint in any other abbeys, castles, any medieval architectural structures, it's just exciting elements, repetitive or rhythmic lines we're looking for. Okay. I think some of my shapes gone a little bit too wide to see the last layer here, but it doesn't matter, we can crop it. Or maybe I'll narrow them down by the time I'll add color. We'll see that reference to widths and things will straighten up. Okay. Just gonna double check my arch is okay, a bit better with that, just leaning a little bit towards the left. Right, and let's have a look what's inside of our arch. Very, very basic, very simplified. So I already started thinking about the shadow on the stairs. I'm going to find where the steps are, that base for them. And they're finishing almost, well, a little bit maybe more than halfway through. But then the last step is going away from us quite narrowly, well, not overly steep. So if you were to compare it to, let's say, a vertical line, yeah, where it's going to be, if you were to continue this line, where it's going to be. So it's just somewhere that angle. So those are just my supportive lines. And I'm going to find approximately where that height of the step's going to be. So if I were to draw it as a slide, where would it, how would it appear? Okay, maybe a little bit shorter. Okay. Now for the size of my painting, I wouldn't be able to draw the steps accurately. What I can do, I can identify approximately direction of the steps. and I will have to play with color. So I don't need to draw the actual steps. Yeah, what's the silhouette of that darker shape here. I can just put some lines, and that will be enough. And we'll do something similar with our color. We'll have that impression. Plus, our steps don't have perfect sharp ridges, unless if you paint in much bigger piece, you can work into those details a bit more. But in our case, the stones are rounded by that wear over the centuries. Scale is quite small. Okay. I'm going to put maybe the edge of the grass. Okay, maybe the border of the stone. Sorry, my steps are getting quite pale, but it's okay. I don't need much details on them. And I'm going to find the line for the base of my guest house, remains of it. Again, it's not quite a straight line. It's just going just tiny bit of the hill down. Okay, there might be another lawn, which is, or another part of the hill kind of balancing it back. And our wall for the guest house is almost straight in front of us, almost like in the middle of our archway. You can move it a little bit more towards the left, a little bit towards the right. It's up to you. Okay. What we have here, we have a lower level. Okay. And we have a reasonably pointy side of the house. The chimneys. Okay. And then we can shape it up. We can make that triangle into a little more of a period structure, a bit more of that. I'll just make it straight here. Okay, and a couple of windows will come in here. And then we see the side of the building. So the building is quite tall. We're below, so we see that corner, and the two sides are leaning away from it. They're leaning down. Okay, so make sure that that corner is the highest. Okay, so the lines are going away from it. And we also can see a little bit of the thickness of our wall here. Just going to crudely put it quite wide. Might check if my whole shape of the building is big enough, maybe tiny bit bigger. Or maybe just gently kind of directing it straighter. That's, I think it's a bit better. And we've got a crumbled wall here. So we've got partially the other wall going that way, but it looks like there would have been a divisional space in between them, and that wall might have continued. So not overly clear what's going on there, but it's one stone moving to another one with a little bit of imperfections and highlights. So I might just turn that one into more less straight shape. Okay. Now my top of the building looks like a pear shape, literally. So when I'll start painting, I'll see if I can make it less silly looking. A little bit sometimes using a bit more straightish geometric lines becomes less appearance of, which might kind of reminding you certain shapes. Sometimes we can avoid it more. Just gonna put that line back. Okay. Good. And then we've got a couple of trees, one on one side, okay, something lower, and perhaps something behind, okay. Maybe some clouds, which we can paint straight away without sketching them. Otherwise, this darker color will make our sky and clouds dark. Okay. Right, well, it's at the bottom, I'm just going to do a shadow here next to the stairs. You can see that angle needs changing here. Okay. And what I've been doing, I've invented another little shadow at the bottom, which could start covering my doorstep here. Doorstep is partially covered in the shadow, okay, somewhere here. And then it starts dropping somewhere else here. But I might invent my own, just that little corner. I think it might connect shapes nicely. We'll see. So loads of dark things at the moment on our picture. But I think that will be enough for our lines and some of the basic darks. And we're ready to start painting lighter shapes and blocks of color. Right, I'm picking up smaller brush and let's work into our highlights. Remember when we were talking about the group of light tones, our sky and our flagstones here, yeah, maybe it's tops of the stairs. So anything pale. So I'm going to start with my sky. It will give me a silhouette of my doorway and will push everything forward and push the sky right back. So smaller brush will be good because we're going to go for thicker paint. A little bit of oil on my brush, some white. White could be quite thick, so tiny bit of oil for that, but we're aiming for overall not diluted paint. We're aiming for good two-spaced type of paint. So some white, I'm just making the consistency of it is good. And I'm going to go for Cellarium blue. Okay. A reasonably dark, so we're probably going to go, if it's all light, probably kind of that type of darkness. Harder to see it on a photograph and compare it. And that's why I've got my color piece here, which we see a little bit better, that blue, slightly darker tone. Right, so I'm going to find my shape of the arch as well as start painting my sky. Now, because we're painting on a dark surface, I'm just doing little indents, possible indents of the texture in the stone. But once I've done that, then I can forget it. Because we're painting on a darker surface, the thicker paint you will use, the more you will block your violet background. The lighter or thinner you will paint, your color will sit on top and appear darker. Okay. So I'm going to block this first. In places it might appear white on my screen, but believe me, it is not. Okay. My camera does silly things with self-adjusting it without any request or need. Okay. And I might, just for the test, put extra darker blue cerulean with my white and just put a stroke there and see how that will sit there. So thick paint. If often we use the background color and use it as our exciting, transparent, partially showing through color. for our sky, we don't want that. We might use it for Cellarium inside of that interior, but not for the sky. Okay, so that's might be a little bit of darker blue. Right, and I'm going to block in direct white just to see how much white I can go into my clouds, and can that white show off our paler blues. Okay, so that's my direct white. Okay, that's good. Now I can just go back to paler blue, but maybe not direct white. This is a lovely sample here. Because it's very hard to judge painting on this darker surface if we're on the right track or not. Okay, a little bit around the guest house. Okay, and I'm going to paint, there might be some more fresh white here. Okay, I'm just testing it more than I'm actually painting the exact shapes. And if it works for me and they look reasonably believable clouds, I might leave them as they are. Okay, let's test any of this white against some of this blue. Okay, lovely thick paint. Okay, maybe a tiny bit more blue, lower level, and then I might just block everything else in with some paler blues. Right, I think that below is going to be my trees. Also working with one color and white kind of simplifies our plan of tones within the sky. The darker violet background sometimes could be used as the shadow of our clouds as well. If we're smudging some of the lines from the archway or from the guest house, I'm smudging it a little bit more. I need to keep cleaning my color so there's not too much violet going on. I'm just filling the gaps now here and see what's going to happen. Maybe a little more variety for this shape of white. Maybe a little bit more wider cloud here. Okay. Okay, I've got trees here, so maybe I'll put some more fresher white for the lower part of the horizon. Okay. So we're starting to have an effect of, ooh, there's a bit of a dusk sunset, late evening, but the sky is still bright. Maybe the last sky light on the sky here. That's the effect we've got so far because we've got nothing else painted. Okay. All right. You can leave this brush out if you're finished, and I'm gonna pick up another brush. So I might keep one cool brush and one warm brush, and then kind of move between them. I think maybe this is a little bigger one will be better. Okay. So my other my other light color, yeah, from these three, it's going to be my warm color. So we had a cool color for sky. Let's go for a warm color. Again, let's look for those about 2 or 3 darks. I don't think there will be much white at all here. If we need to have a little sparkle, we can always add a little bit, but we're mainly going to be working with off-whites. We've got highlighter light kind of titles for them there. Okay, so that's 2 and 3 gradient of darkness. So I'm gonna go again for some oil. Okay, I'm gonna go for some fresh white. I'm gonna just mix that oil with my white thoroughly first, and then I'm gonna go for some ochre. I would have said we can have a little bit of violet with it, but we've got a violet background. So if I were to add a small amount of oil, so my paint is not as thick as my white and blue was, but a little bit soft, a little bit runnier. It might just give me a tiny bit of that transparency here. And I'm gonna paint, okay, that doesn't come out overly bright, might be even come out as 3 and 4, 4 maybe. So I can always put some thicker paint over. But let's just find that shape of overall light for the ground. Yeah, it's quite transparent. But let's just block that in. Okay. Not too much oily surface. So it's the paint is there. It's stretched out, but it's not runny. Okay. And it looks an odd shape because it's a little bit foreign and a bit on its own. So I'm gonna do little lines for my steps. And now I can look out for how much of that space, that light space, we see at the bottom of the stairs, and how much of it we're going to start seeing at the top of the stairs. So the lines will become narrower and narrower till they almost disappear. Okay, and they're also partially changing angle from that direction to more of a straight and then gently even leaning down here. Okay, that started to be a bit more interesting. My pavement also continues in a little bit of worn out part of the grass. Oh, you could paint the grass all the way to that line. I'm going to paint a little bit here and see what it feels later. Okay. Can also use some of this color and a soft application of it on my doorstep, so we can just about see some light here. Okay, make it just a little bit sharper on behind the doorstep. I'm leaving a gentle thin line just for now. It might disappear, might have a slightly different color or thickness of that layer, so it might vary it, but just gives me a little bit of the contour. This stone will have a little extra light on its side here as well. And I might even put some of that extra bolder light here on the wall. Okay. And there is another doorway, well, kind of the edge of the wall here. We can just see that bolder light. And then suddenly the stone's gently turning away from us, so we see them slightly darker. Okay, can I see a tiny bit of light here behind this step? So this light might remain the color we're painting now when the pavement, maybe just connect it for now, when the pavement by the steps might be getting brighter. Okay, so we start to have a little bit more light now. Can we see any light behind our guest house? Well, we've got this warmer light. Maybe there will be a little window. Maybe there will be a little glow through the window. We can widen it and we can shrink it at any point. Yeah, sometimes just a little indication of it will give us a reference for later. There's a bit of light on the border of one of the walls here. Okay. Kind of a highlight, but by the time we paint it on top of our violet strokes, it might be just a little bit of light coming up on our guest house. Okay. What I haven't done, I haven't painted or drawn. There is a little stone standing here. I think it's just a little in the middle of things. If I wanted to include it, maybe I were to put it across here. But as long as it's not interrupting your composition, so that dark one, yes, might be the staircase rail, or it might have been an old wall for it, or something else. So maybe feel free to move it about. I deliberately moved it further down so it doesn't clash with my guest house. Okay. Now, can I go for the same color but thicker? More white, a little bit of extra ochre if needed, but mainly thicker paint, and I want to place it in chunks, especially close to my steps here. Look how much more stronger that appears, because it's a thick paint, and that's when we need to place it instead of paint it, rub it in. I tend to say place it. It's almost like a chunk of thick butter. Okay, you place it and you more or less don't move it about, otherwise it will start disintegrating and then start rubbing into thinner layers. So maybe that will come here. And the reason we painted it thinner first, we could have painted the whole lot quite thickly. The reason we painted it thinly is that thick strokes can be applied in few places but not everywhere. So it will sharpen up some of our shadows. You can create almost texture straight away now. Okay, I might even need to place that paint a number of times over a certain area. That's okay. Keep topping up your paint, keep topping up your white within that paint mixture. Okay, it's not perfect, but it's got that feel for stone surface. Okay, and perhaps a little bit of that mortar showing between that bits of soil and between the stonework. That's where our doorstep might vary in a little bit in color or a little bit more in that light. Okay, and I'm going to do a couple of our lower steps, maybe 2 or 3, those wider ones. They could have been painted lighter straight away, but it's not a big deal. Sometimes it's visually easier to recognize things not in direct full light or full darkness. Okay, maybe something there, and then they started to be a little bit paler as we see less of them. Now, if we have a wooden wedge, this is when we can start giving our pavement a little scratch, yeah, and create some of that texture of stonework. Okay. maybe more suggestive than sketching it all out. Don't like something, you can paint over it. Those lines don't have to be too similar in widths or too perfect. But some ideas of direction sometimes very helpful. Visually recognize it. I think some of my strokes, what I was trying to do, my lovely stones, and didn't quite materialize. So scratching the surface will be perhaps easier. As much as we want to follow some of the perspectives for those lines as well, there's a general idea here. So they're all going, I'm following this, the bottom step here, and they're kind of all going that way, and slowly opening up. But if they're slightly not straight, there will be loads of replacement stones, there will be loads of almost mosaic-like patches over the years, so they're not always will appear perfect or are perfect. Okay, so if you turn them to be more appearing as cobbles, that's fine as well. Okay, there's still, again, still quite a lot of glow of light. We only have that oak and we only have a little bit of blue. So we need to have our building color for the building and some of the lighter greens for it to start showing a bit more excitingly inside of our doorway. Right, I'm gonna come back to my blue brush and I want to mix some lovely greens. So without cleaning it, if you cleaned it a little, that's fine as well. I'm going to top it up with a bit of fresh white. Okay. My blue is actually running out from the brush. If you picked up a little bit of warmer color of white, that's okay, because we're going to be mixing our if you've still got some of your blue on your brush, or pick up tiny bit of emerald green, that's quite a bit actually, and some yellow. Okay, so we're looking for a lovely sunny green, and I'm going to top it up with some extra white. So our green is going to be slightly darker. Well, probably going to be about 4 to 5 darknesses, yeah, in darkness, yeah, one or the other. Our trees are darker than the field, yeah, than our lawn there. So let's place a little bit of green and see if it's need to be lighter later on, or if we can keep it as it is, if the trees need to be extra darker. So let's paint that one. Maybe a little indents of brush strokes for the steps, just so the paint comes slightly closer to it. Okay, sometimes those steps get overgrown with the meadow flowers and plants, so it doesn't have to be precise. So I've decided to leave that block in here for now. Okay, so my borderline is going to be here again. Nice and thick paint. If you don't use thick enough paint, the color will stay transparent. We'll continue seeing a lot of our background violet. If needed, just get more white. That will make the color more opaque. Okay, mix it with a little bit of extra yellow, a little bit of extra white. It's not going to be hugely changing it light, but it will thicken up the paint and will make a difference in application and its appearance. Okay, I'm just making it slightly thicker here. Sometimes the paint goes in and at the base of your bristle, so keep squeezing it, or use a tissue to wipe it and then collect that paint and bring it back to your tip of the brush. Okay, maybe somewhere here. So it's only a small area I'm painting, but I want to make sure I'm almost applying it as thick as if I would have been working with a palette knife. Okay, good. And now I'm going to paint a slightly lighter version of the trees. I think I'm going to use the same color but add to it a small amount of ochre. Okay, mix really well so it's absorbed well, so we can see the tops of the trees. So for example, somewhere here is a little paler than some of the other parts of the foliage there. So a bit somewhere here, maybe a little couple of gaps, maybe a little bit of something here. If it's if you're not sure about the right color, we can always add to that. Yeah, just put an approximate yellowish, orangey-ish green. And I can start adding slightly more emerald green. To make the color darker, if you just use emerald greens, it will be too emerald. Okay, we don't want that. So we can use a little bit of cadmium red with that. Or violet. I've used cadmium red, minuscule amount, but it's made a massive difference. And then I'm going to paint the rest of my trees. And if I need some extra darker greens, I'll put it on top of this current color. As I'm coming close to my pale areas, I can gently smudge into them. Okay, so start having softer touches. Okay, coming close to the lawn, I can gently smudge into that. So again, mainly blocking. That's quite a nice, because it's darker color, it sits better on my violet background. It sits much more easier than any of the paler colors. But now, next to the green, the blue started to be much more sunny and bright and bold. Okay. I also want a small amount of this green. I think maybe on my lawn. Just a little smudge again. I think that's starts appearing a little better. And we wanted a little extra shadow, so I can again go for small amount of red. If it's too red, small amount of green, kind of balance it out. And it's giving a beautiful darkness. We want a very small amount of it. Maybe even a hint of blue or any of those combinations. And next to the guest house, I'm going to put a couple of strokes. Maybe a tiny bit more blue. Blue gives it a beautiful depth as well. Little gaps. Okay, that's a very dark one. It's quite intensive. But I think if I were just to gently touch it in a few areas, I think that will work in our advantage. Beautiful depths here. Sometimes overthinking will give you an overpainting. So small amounts, dab, dab, stop, another dot, stop. Okay, not too sure, stop. Okay, that's giving me some lovely depths. Sometimes certain strokes come out a bit awkward, we can come back again to them. But that's giving a nice steps. Guest house looks wobbly and wonky. because we haven't touched it yet, but I think the green is working well. Maybe something else here for me. Okay, I can maybe clean my green brush now. Right, I'm back to my warmer brush. I haven't even cleaned it, so I'll keep that patch there just in case if I'll need some of that paint. So let's get a little bit of oil. Let's get a little bit of oak and white. And we're gonna look for the color for our guest house. So oak and white will be a good starting point. And I'm gonna go for my cadmium red. Cadmium red could be very powerful, so you can always put it on the side first, so you've got a small amount at a time, and then mix the color together. Okay, I can see some of the heat through the windows of the guest house, but if we look at the whole wall in comparison to the warmth of the gate, the stone of the Cellarium, the wall appears cooler. Okay, we need to make sure we'll make that wall of the guest house much lighter as well. Now, it's harder to judge what's lighter, what's darker on the black and white photograph. A little bit more clearer on the photograph in color, but deliberately, if we could make that judgment or not, deliberately make the decisions that it will be lighter because it's further away from us. It's got more exposure to light to where we are, okay, inside of the solarium. So I'm going to put a little extra warmth around the windows from my that oak and cadmium red, just a little bit wider strokes because it's harder to make the smaller ones. We can always shrink those blocks. Maybe another little O entrance so there is a bit of texture of light or something in there. Okay. And then I'm going to use a small amount of violet and some extra white. So violet will make my color darker, but we want it paler, so the white will come in. There's a very small amount of pink present. Violet and white will make it less saturated in pigment. Okay. I think it might be a little bit too light. Let's put a stroke here and let's compare. You need to be tiny bit, need to be lighter than darker shadows of the trees, but darker than our lawn. Okay, so that's a tricky task. So I might have that red back, that a little bit of violet back, and I might just very gently play with that proportion of color and keep testing it. Okay, maybe a tiny bit more. Okay, maybe tiny bit more. Or maybe I can make a slightly lighter stroke of green next to my guest house. That could be another option. I might get my green brush, little extra yellow, extra fresh white. Make the color more yellowish and whitish than needed and paint over our existing green strokes. Might give us a combination of overall appearance of paler green. Okay, that's need to have much thicker paint to make any impact. Okay, worst case scenario, if our field started to look quite yellowish, it could be full of buttercups. And we're just seeing quite a lot of that lovely yellowish glow. Okay, so maybe just a little extra light there. Again, this is what I'm doing on my work. It depends what you have on your painting already. You might not need it. Right, another option for my stone wall of the gatehouse. If I don't want to, just feels too light. If I were to dilute my current color, which is too light, if I dilute it, look how much more darker it is. Aha, I think we're in a winner here. So diluted version of that color would be much better. And then I can shrink my openings for windows, doors. Okay, that's much better. That's what our dark background created for us. Okay. I might keep even more diluted paint for some of the borders where we want to have more contrast here next to the corner of the building. Okay, or I can just use a little bit of extra violet and red. Right, I'm not overly convinced that this is the right tone for our guest house in comparison to our future interior. But it's working with our trees and our lawn and our sky at the moment, so let's stay with that for now. Okay. If we can have a couple of contrast walls, so for example, the most right wall bordering the tree zone would be fantastic to keep it darker. Maybe if I use a small amount of ultramarine with my colors, I can follow maybe a tiny bit of violet, not just ultramarine. Follow the width of my wall here. Okay, the glow from the windows not quite working as I want it yet, but we're on the way for it. We can put mini volumes of red and any other darker color just to get a little depth to our windows. More of a contrast sometimes as well. I'm just putting a little mark above the windows, an archway, or as a little stroke as a, okay, maybe changing that shadow from a straight line to slightly diagonal shape. Maybe this door will have a tiny bit more, maybe it's a narrower opening so it's could see more shadow in there. That little line, which could have been a pattern, let's make it a bit more exciting, yeah? Little contrast where some of the roof might have been attached. or is that breakage? Part of the wall. See some of the stone coming out. Okay, that's more interesting. And you know what? My little stone by the steps could have something similar in color here as well. Just going to put it a little bit darker. Well, that's quite nice. Might give me a hint, an idea of some of the darkness for steps. I used diluted cadmium red and a small amount of violet. It's giving me a lovely glow of redness, more diluted color. Look how it beautifully comes together with the violet. Got that support. So we've done all the tricky parts, and the distance, things close to us will be much more simpler painted. And that's quite exciting what those steps are starting to do. I was focusing on that guest house and I ended up finding a decision for our steps. And a little rock stone old banister could also have a tiny bit of glow light around it. It's on the border. The light is right behind it. I think I'm just losing its highlight. Not just white, maybe a warmer light, so a bit of ochre. Okay, I'm just going to put it over, and then I'm going to put my darker tone over it again, just to shrink that volume of highlight. Okay, that's a bit better. Okay, that gives it a nice close to us feel, something more soft and more less sharper space further away from us. Okay, I'm happy with that. Okay, good. Just touching any of a couple of strokes here. Good. So the background is looking exciting. Even if we were to leave everything as it is, we've got that almost like narrative calmness and then suddenly a wow factor point. Right, let's focus now on the doorway and some exciting light. Well, we're talking about now originally I said we're looking at the last three tones for all of that interior, but I think those highlights around the doorway, especially looking at my black and white photograph, probably could be stretched to 5 and 6 in places. Yeah, some of these ones might be somewhere even that's 3. Yeah, that's what we already have. So that's okay, as long as the rest will remain to that darkness. Probably not going to have a lot of black. I tend not to have a lot of that, maybe small quantities. But those super deep shadow, I'll probably never paint them in black, so I probably will keep the most at 8. Okay. So highlights of the darks. So that's we're talking about high dark. Okay. I'm going to use my same smaller size brush for now, and maybe cloth or sponge or big brush for bigger shadows. So oil on my brush, some extra white as a base. So that will give us a foundation for the new color. Let's go for, I'm going to go for some yellow. Okay, ochre will be fine. I think yellow will mix extra well with our red. We'll give it more of an orangey, fresher look to the color. then ochre. Ochre, I will use ochre as well later, but I think that will give me a little fresher, bolder, more saturated with pure color option here. Okay. And I'm going to work quite loosely, plain with my colors. So just to get me an idea of layers or kind of how many different rows of stone we're going to have. Okay, that's a bit harder to see at the moment. I'm going to maybe make it a tiny bit more towards the red, but slightly more with the white, so it's less transparent. Okay, right. Next layer. Might be a slightly darker layer. So maybe I can skip that one and go for that bigger one. If needed to go towards more red or even towards red and violet and white, that's okay. But the yellow, presence of the yellow will still keep the color not into pastely white, but that stronger orangey vibe. Right, and we can just play with the exciting strokes, pressing with your brush. Doesn't have to be perfect. Okay, paint will be running out. Don't be scared of adding more paint. And if the color changes, use it as a bonus. See how it sits against things. Now, we're still painting against the dark background and of a violet one as well. So it's slightly harder for us still to judge what's going to happen to it when we have extra shadows. So let's keep on playing. Okay, so these are little lit up corners. They might be not lit up as we want, but that will be a good start. Okay, maybe this one will be somewhere here. Maybe a tiny bit of ochre for this side. So it's more of a duller color instead of yellowish and orange. I have more of that sandstone. That's immediately much more opaque in color and paler from ochre. Okay, I quite like that. I can use the violet background as perhaps the mortar. Yeah, if you don't paint all of it, that's fine. Or if you decide to paint all of it, you can always scratch it back. Okay, sometimes using a little bit of the outlines gives us exciting borders, gives us exciting contrast as well. Okay, that might be interesting. Might bring this color over again, and maybe a little bit of over on our doorstep. Okay, and perhaps even the most light part of the inner window. You can always make it slightly darker. Okay, I think that will be an exciting introduction of new light, new source of light, not just coming from our doorway, but from elsewhere. Okay, and if I want to keep everything this side of the interior more into warm color, maybe the window will have more cooler colors. Maybe that will be the most warm color, and then it will go towards more some of the blues, some of the cooler pigments. Right, so let's come back to some more reds. Let's add a bit more violet to it again. Some of the lovely deeper purples. Or it's not a pinky red, so we're not going to have pure purples. We'll have more of a lovely reds of the stones, kind of bricks reds. Okay, well, that's going to be maybe still a tiny bit more darker. Okay, maybe something warmer, extra red coming in. Okay, nothing happened. Yeah, that's a lovely color. Okay, I'm liking that. Right, can I put this color elsewhere? That beautiful reddish hint. Okay, maybe somewhere this side. I don't want all of the lengths of that arch staying the same color. Darkness sometimes changes gently, but not significantly. But color will be fantastic to move about. Okay, that's where we had that little contrast. Let me see if I were to lift my board a tiny bit more. Okay, hold on a moment. Right, so a little bit better for the screen not to over reflect the surface. Okay, right, let's have a look. Extra white and fresher violet. Let's see if that will be a lighter type of purple with the remains of the pink in it. Okay, that's an exciting color. Let's place it maybe somewhere here. Okay, let's see if that's going to be too light. So it has less yellow or ochre in it. Mainly not so fresh violet, not so fresh from reds, and the remains of the ochres. Okay, so that's could come up somewhere here. I'm going to just play and test where similar color could go. Maybe somewhere here. Will be very exciting to see how the same painting would have developed on an orange background, where that lovely glow of orange could be showing through the stonework. Okay, maybe slightly more violet as it's descending into lower parts. I'm trying to make each layer of stonework in that repetitive arch shape changing from one light to another, slightly deeper one. We've got almost to a very dark tone here. Maybe I can even use a bit of ultramarine and violet here and make a beautiful dark here. Look how strong it's going to be against the ochre and the gorgeous whites and blues of the sky. So that's not black, that's mainly ultramarine. Okay. Now we can paint it thinly and runnily, or we can paint it thickly, and that viscosity will give us chunky strokes and playful, more defined shadows. Both will be wonderful to have in our work. So I'm going to start with some thicker paint here on the corner on the right, but I think for the bigger spaces I might use more diluted strokes. Let's find a couple of those shadows. Okay, I can vary this dark color going from ultramarine to more ultramarine and red. These lovely imperfections of darkness to, again, back to strong ultramarine. So it's becoming very excitingly narrative painting. Okay, where are those lovely darker triangles we were looking for? Sometimes I can work around my strokes of light and create a new line. Don't want them to be too perfect. Maybe we can scratch some of the texture or some of the stone. Okay. Sometimes we can paint it with that thicker ultramarine. And it mixes with our border colors, and it's no longer just looks pure ultramarine. It's almost a bit of a burnt stone. Or okay, that might be a little bit too much texture, but I can smudge that after. But here, I think that will work. Gonna go for more violet. Okay. Where I want extra contrast could be back to ultramarine. You can incorporate your background violet to some of your colors as well. Okay, so I'm considering leaving some of the violet here, or maybe some of the violets elsewhere. Okay, let's wipe my brush and maybe just go for softening some of these quite thick darks. I might just smudge in the gentler change of color. Okay, don't want them to look quite perfect or like teeth-like. Yeah, don't want them to be more of a suggestive light. Okay. My darks, I think I'm going to blend it out so it doesn't have to know exactly where it's stopping, but might be a little hint of light coming through. Again, there might be some more shadow. So now I'm going to start picking up all my wider brush. I think a bigger brush or cloth or sponge, as I said earlier. I was hoping to use a sponge or even a bigger brush, but my areas are staying smaller and smaller as we worked with some thicker paint. So I think that will be probably big enough scale brush for me next. I'm going to use some oil. Okay, that's going to be runny. I'm going to go for my cadmium red, and I'm going to go for my ultramarine. Okay, maybe a hint more of that ultramarine. And I'm going to get some lovely runny layer. Now, first it will appear very dark, but as it will start settling in, and that shine will start, the kind of viscosity of the paint will give the appearance of black. Okay, so anything else dark I might start applying much quicker. Also, when the paint settles, I think it's already just giving it that much more paler feel. Because it's transparent, you can see it here in the palette. what makes it look dark is that it's damp. Okay, so the darkness is only suggestive. Well, we can do quick corners, quick strokes. Okay, maybe all of that could be even here. That's not going to be hugely dark. Look how gorgeous that violet is here now. Yeah, I'm very much considering playing with it now and incorporating it with just more of a runny paint, so that violet background is starting to play its role. I think I'm going to just smudge a little bit of color with a bit of just fresh oil, and if the other colors drag or mix a little extra, that will be a benefit. Wow, look at that. Yeah, that boldness of contrasts. Perfect time to enjoy our process, no matter what the outcome. Because if you're not worried about the process, you're enjoying it, your outcome will be successful. Because you're not worried, you're relaxed, you're playful, you go with your gut feeling. Okay, certain awkward shapes that doesn't look quite a nice kind of angle. Okay, can I just gently soften it to just kind of get more suggestive? Yeah, that's lovely. And picking up just accidentally a few colors and dragging them across becomes wonderful. That looks like, is that a wooden texture? Is that something? Yeah, strokes of the stone wall. What is it? How that one comes out excitingly. Right, can I put some more diluted ultramarine? Right, I'm gonna go for diluted ultramarine. I didn't wash my brush, so if any remains of the red is there, that's fine. I think extra shadows, maybe for these areas will come in, and maybe for the ground here, maybe a darker shadow. If you need to mix ultramarine and red together, that's fine. A bit of in between, that's going to be my darker step. Okay, another little area as we're coming in inside of the Cellarium. Okay, giving it a lovely playful feel here. Right, let's wipe my brush so it's not too runny. But then I can connect a couple of these shadows here. It's going to be too strong. Maybe I can just wipe it off. So it's not going to be a clean, fresh violet from original color, but something less perfect. Good. And I'm gonna go for some more white and something purple like violet and blue. I want to work a tiny bit more onto my window, so not too light, but with a hint of coolness. Okay, maybe a little more. Okay, that's about the same. That's okay. It means that I can paint a slightly darker version of it next to it. Okay, tiny, tiny, tiny bit more. Okay. Maybe tiny bit more darker. And tiny hint of red in there. So it's a different type of red, not that yellowish ochre, orangey red, but it's more of the purpley red. Maybe there will be a little border or little sharper corner. Okay, I need a clean tissue. Quite likes those hints of it, but I still need to play maybe with a bit more light. Maybe bring more white and see. Not being scared of putting extra light. Let's give that one a go. We see a little extra light on the wall. Just want to make it more of a radiating glow of light. Okay. Maybe even putting a cooler light inside of our window over some of the yellowish color. Let's test that one out as well. No, that's gonna smudge into more of a green color. Okay, tiny bit of that. Okay, that's something interesting. Not 100% convinced yet, still testing it out. Maybe the window frame will have that slightly darkness. I think that's what I'm missing. Okay, I don't know if it's too light now. And let's maybe bring more runnier, darker tone for that window frame, which I left slightly more suggested earlier. Okay. That little texture, that little broken surface. Maybe less perfect as a line, maybe more as a again stone layers of it, the thickness of the wall. Okay, something changing. Okay, I think that's more interesting. I just bring some of that paler color a little more down. Just improvising off what we have very little information on from our photos. Okay, so it's not too bright, but sits there. So if I were to look, instead of just at the window, which I have been looking for a while, but look at the whole picture, does it sit well with it? Yes. Does the lovely oranges glow? Yes, they do. Maybe small amounts of texture on these stones, and we're almost there. Okay. Little hinges I haven't done here yet. Let's make them a little bit sharper. Any of your darker colors? You know what? I have not used my Payne's Grey. I thought I might need it, but I haven't used it. So those darker tones from reds and ultramarines worked really well today. Okay, maybe sharper contrast here. Okay, that's good. And maybe just bring my colors, those runny colors are settling down much more paler now, which is exciting. Okay, we see more lights through them. Those are nice, maybe little highlights. The finger painting. I don't know if I want that sharp detail, might be a bit too strong and too much, but I'm brave to put it in and make that judgment, perhaps using a bigger brush, almost partially losing it as well. So last few tweaks and checking how the paint settled, maybe more deeper shadows and a couple of corners. You have to make the window to stand out even more, to get that extra depth. And then blend it with the existing color. Maybe some of these strokes will come from there as well. I did like extra depth here. And then that playfulness could stop at any point. You can rest, step away from your picture, come back later, see how the colors are interacting with each other, how they've been running, how they start drying. Are they a bit too strong? Are they a little bit too, maybe partially, I'm putting it a little bit more obscure here. And also there's nothing wrong if you were painting away and then you decided, you know what, my archway is more exciting. Maybe it's too much work elsewhere, or maybe we can include more of the interior and add more details there. Okay, so those variations could be worked into. Right, you know what I've done here? I need to have tiny bit more of the angle of my ground changing. Remember we were talking about the angle of the steps. Okay, so that's going to become my shadow. Okay, so that's will become a stretched out gentle darkness from that corner, and that might just give me a little more of the directional corner here as well. Right, that's better for the hinge, so it's not solid black in appearance, but a little bit of a variety. Right, am I happy to stop? I think I am. Any tweaks on extra light where we have painted, where we haven't, within this area? You'll see it maybe better during daylight or when you lean your painting or look at the painting from different angles. There could be little extra highlights going alongside of the wall. I think I partially smudged that. So little tweaks can continue, but the majority of the work is there. Probably a good 95% is all in place. That atmosphere is there, that space, that light. I don't think I'm hardly painted, if painted at all, some of the surfaces here for my shadows, but I'm really enjoying that color combination. What I could do with some of my ochres here, if I'll smudge them, the borders might be a little bit too soft blends, like for the distant trees and clouds. So sharper ones are better. Now I could tweak tiny bit of the color on the ground. I could tweak tiny little few things here and there, but it's not going to be a big deal, okay? So have a feel for the space and color groupings, yeah? Where things are more smudged, where things are a bit more sharper, where things are more warmer, where things are a little bit more cooler. And play on that rather than the perfecting, being as close as we can to our photograph. So I hope you had fun and experimented today. Had more thicker paint earlier on and thinner layers later, which we usually do the other way around. And let me know how you get on. Thank you very much for today, and I look forward to seeing your paintings.